Welcome to this tutorial where I'll be teaching you how to use OnShape. This tutorial is meant for people who are just starting with CAD or just starting with OnShape or just starting with CAD in general. And the idea of this is if you're coming into this with little or no experience on how to use OnShape, this video is a video for you. So here where I am right now is the OnShape homepage. So if you made an account and you boot in, this is the first thing you'll see. So this is kind of just all your files you have, and I'm just gonna walk through walk through this thing so you can just get familiar with the homepage of OnShape. So here we have on the left bar, we have these tabs over here. You don't have to worry about this stuff here with classes and classroom. That's only if you I don't know, if you're at school and you do OnShape at school and you have like an OnShape class or something, and your teacher will set this up. So for robotics, I have that classroom where basically what it allows is for collaboration between multiple people and the teacher in the class, and they can share files and work on stuff together. But today we'll just be focusing on Owned by Me. So we have this tab Owned by Me. This is all your files that you've created and you owned. So up here you have last open. This is just recent stuff that it suggests for you to open. Folders is the folders you've created. So if you want to make folders for your files, if you have like multiple files for a project or if like interrelated things, you can make a single folder for that. And these are just all your Owned by Me files in general. And you can also view Share with Me. This is like docs that are shared with you. So you see these folders shared with me, created by me. So this is kind of the same thing as Owned by Me, but they might not be completely owned by you in total. Yeah, so basically recently opened, also the same thing as we saw before. So most of the time you'll be spending will be on this Owned by Me page. So what we're going to do this video is I'm going to teach you how to make a desk clamp for your headphones. So you could like have a headphone thing that holds or a thing that comes into your desk that has a hook to hold your headphones. This will be a 2-part series. We'll start off with the main stuff and the basics in this series, and we'll finish that and talk about some more complicated things in the second video. So today we'll start out with making a new folder. You'll click this create drop down on the top left, and we're gonna click folder. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm just gonna call it learning OnShape. So we'll just create that, and you see I was in Owned by Me, and we'll create something. It'll be a folder Owned by Me and by me only. So now we're in the folder. Now you can see Owned by Me, and then this arrow means like it's inside Owned by Me. So learning OnShape. So you can also go back to Owned by Me, and you can kind of see the file tree there. So we go back to learning OnShape, and then now we're in the folder. We can create a document. If you click create, and then this top part right here, you want to make sure you're in your folder, and click document, and then we'll create a desk headphone clamp holder, I guess. Yeah, call it whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna call it that. So here we are in the file. So important things to start off with. Down here you have your kind of tab bar and the file. So files can consist of multiple things. They can have part studios and assemblies. If you import parts, they'll also show up here, and you can see they'll either be an assembly or part studio, and you can also see the step file that they come from. So here, the part studio is where you'll be designing your parts, which is what we're going to go through today. In your assembly file, this is a bit different. You do not design parts in here. You import parts from part studios, and you can copy parts. You can make multiple parts. And you can like let's say you wanted to have if an assembly it consisted of copies of multiple parts. You wouldn't make multiple parts. You could just make one of those parts in the part studio and then import multiple of them into the assembly. But we'll get to that later. So here is, you'll import parts, and then you could have mates that can define their relation in space to each other. So this is where, like, if you have an entire thing that you catted and you want to see all the relation between the parts and you want to have all the parts together, you can put them in the assembly and see what that looks like. All right, so I guess we'll get into it here with how to design it. So up here is basically everything you'll be using. These are how you essentially design it and make parts. So everything that you make will start with a sketch. So a sketch is a 2D, I don't really know what to call it, 2D thing that you'll make that you can do these operations to in order to bring it to 3D space. So to start off with our clamp, we'll make a sketch. Shift S is the keyboard shortcut for making a sketch. And when you make a sketch, you'll see that you have the option, or it's telling you to select a sketch plane because you need a plane for the sketch to sit on. When you start, you'll have 3 planes. You'll have a front, right, and top plane, which are the XY, YX, and XZ planes. Not respectively, but those are just the dimensions for each of the sketches. So we'll start with going on the front sketch. So you can see here, our bar here is a bit different now that we're in a sketch because these are all the sketch options. What you saw before were all the operations for creating things in 3D space and also performing those on sketches. But since we're in a sketch now, we'll start with the basics. So we have a line here. This is your very basic, most like fundamental piece. It's just a line segment. You place a point by clicking. You can do L as a keyboard shortcut to select it. You click, and then you can move your mouse, and you can click on another point, and that will place it. And you have things like rectangles, which you can. This is a corner rectangle, so you place a corner, and you place the other corner, and then the sides will automatically be horizontal and vertical. And then there are all other things like center point rectangle. You place a center point and then you drag a corner, or a line rectangle where you place 3 points instead. So you don't have to make it horizontal or vertical. You have circles. You select a circle, you can place a point and you expand outwards, and that essentially just determines the diameter of the circle. You have a 3-point arc, which you can place 3 points to define an arc, and then also other types of arcs. Not important for today though. Inscribed polygon, this isn't not that useful. I haven't really ever used that, but essentially you can select it and it will make a polygon with, and it's a circle inscribed in it or a circumscribed circle. Spline is a bit more complicated. I don't really use this much, but basically you have points that define a curve, and then point, and then you also just have point, and then yeah. So to start off with creating a sketch of the part you want to make, normally you want to determine what kind of sketch or what kind of sketch we want to make, and then in relation, or kind of like what face we want to be represented with our first sketch. So here's a drawing I have that I sketched out like with a pen on my iPad, or Apple Pencil on my iPad. This is not like a cat sketch. So you can see here we have this face on the side, and we kind of want to, and we can kind of see that, and we kind of say, okay, maybe we want to make a sketch of that profile. So we have a kind of hook shape, and then we have this kind of open C shape, which is what clamps onto the desk. So we can start out with making the C shape maybe. So normally what you want to do is you want to start at the origin, because if you don't, then your lines are kind of unconstrained and you can kind of just drag them around. And in this video, I'll also be teaching you how to constrain sketches. So you want to start placing a line at the origin, and then once you place a line, it will just continue on. You can just continue off that other point. So right now we're not going to worry about the dimensions. We're just going to get this shape. So we have this. Yeah, okay. And you probably could have, or maybe able to tell when I was placing lines that you could see like these dotted lines showing up, and then kind of my cursor snapping into a position. That's what's called auto constraining. So you can see how these lines, when I hover over them, there's this little box that shows a horizontal line. That is a horizontal constraint that was applied automatically. Horizontal constraint is what you think. When you apply that, it will make the line exactly horizontal. But you can also apply that manually if you just place a line, and then if you go to your drop down here, this will have all your constraints. So constraints are what let you like kind of lock your sketch into position, and then prevents you from like moving stuff around and lets you like precisely define the geometry of the shape you're trying to make. So if I were to click horizontal and then applied that, it would make it horizontal. You could click H for that. And here you can see vertical constraint, which is the same thing, except it's vertical instead of horizontal. So you can see now we kind of have this shape, this rough outline of what we want to make, but you can see we don't really know how big any of this is, and we can also kind of just move it around. So we don't really have a definite kind of shape for what we want to make. So now comes another constraint we want to apply, which is the dimension constraint. So you can get this by clicking D, which will bring up the dimension, or you can go to the, not the drop down, you can just click, or you can go to the drop down. Yes, you can go to the drop down, or you can, or sorry, I normally just click D. If you go to, yeah, or you can search dimension. It might not be in the drop down, just not, it might actually just be here. I might just not be seeing it because I always just click D. So I think it always just shows up here. Anyway, you can click D to get the dimension. You can just apply dimensions to this shape. So you can see we want to probably define this size for this gap. This is what kind of clamps it goes around the table. So let's say my desk that I have here is, I have a ruler here I can measure. It is 35 millimeters thick. So how this is gonna work is there's gonna be kind of an opening in that gap, so it's not gonna, like this C shape is not gonna clamp right around it. It's gonna have a clamp that comes out of here that you can screw in. So you want a good amount of space between the thickness of the table and also the total height of this C shape. You can click D and then click on this line right here, and that will help you define the width of the C shape. So we have 35, and we're gonna have to fit a clamp in here that will clamp it on the table, and that's probably gonna be around 10 millimeters. And we do want a bit of space between that also. We could probably say we'll do like 50 millimeters. How about that? 50 millimeters. And you can see when I do that, it scales everything down it just kind of keeps the shape and then scales everything down so that so this line will be 50 millimeters long. So you can see here also, I'm not sure if you could tell, when I was dragging this point, you can see how this line also moves in. That's because when I was doing it or drawing this out, vertical constraint was automatically applied. So like if I'm drawing a shape like this and I go like this, you can see how if you kind of hover over it, if it doesn't work at first, you can kind of hover over that point and then drag upwards, and then you can see the horizontal constraint is automatically applied, and the vertical constraint was applied. This is a bit different from vertical of a line because there's no line there, but you can vertically or horizontally constrain points, so those points are vertical or horizontal from each other. Yeah, so just click note on that. So yeah, that's why these kind of like move in tandem, because these points are vertical, which you can see by hovering over, and then you can see the vertical constraint that is applied, and you can see the 2 points that are on that line. All right, so now we dimension that, we can dimension these parts, which kind of the thickness of the clamp. So these parts have to be pretty thick because I've actually made a version of this myself, and if you clamp it down, the edges might tend to bend, so you kind of want to make it thick. So one I made one time was 15 millimeters. So you can go ahead and click D and then apply 15 millimeter constraint. And then another constraint that we'll learn about is the equal constraint. So you can either go to the drop down and click equal, or you can click E, which is what I always do. So if you have the equal constraint selected, you just have to select the lines you want to be equal, and then hit escape when you're done. Whenever you want to exit out of any operation, you can just click escape. So now those are equal. So like you can see, if I change this dimension, it will change the dimension of that line below, because we want them to be equal length. So now we got that. Now we can choose a dimension for how long this kind of goes around the table. We can say this doesn't really matter that much, but we can say like 50 millimeters or so. So we'll make this line 50 millimeters. But you know, it might make it longer. We'll do like let's see, we'll do like 80. How about that? 80. Yeah. Okay, so now we have this kind of C-shaped part that's hugging the table. Not quite, it's a bit bigger because the clamp is going to be what presses that against the bottom of this. But yeah, so you can see that that's what we have so far, and then we still have this unconstrained bit over here. So this part needs to be where the headphones sit in. So if you want to, I don't know if you're making this actually for headphones. If you have headphones, you don't want to make this, and you do want to make this, you should measure them yourself and apply these dimensions so they fit. Mine are around 30 millimeters thick, and then we don't really want it to be super tight, so like we can make it a bit wider than that. So mine, I might make like do like 36 millimeters. Okay, so now we have that. But you can see this, so you can see that length is defined, but this is not defined relative to the origin, I guess. So these are still kind of, you can still move this around. So first we'll decide is we want to define this point relative to this point. So what you can either do is, since these lines are parallel and they're both vertical, you could just draw, or you could just dimension the distance between those, or you could dimension the distance between these points and then drag upwards until you get the horizontal distance. So we can just call it 20 millimeters. Doesn't really matter too much. 20 millimeters. And then we also want to know how high this point needs to be relative to this point, or this point doesn't really matter. The goal is just for you to define it in a way that you understand and that locks it into position. So we have this point right here, and we can click on that, and we can click on this bottom line right here, and we can give it a dimension. We can say like how would we say 20 there. So now, and then all I have to do is just define this part here. So this thickness of this hook part, we could say is, we could just say is like 10 millimeters. How about that? And then last thing would just be this height here, which we could give a dimension and then say this is, let's see, this is probably, doesn't matter too much, but you might want to measure the height of the thickness of your headphone band. Mine is 10 millimeters. So it doesn't really need to be that much higher, and to make it easier to grab, you could probably just give it and just say 10 millimeters. All right, so now we have the basic shape of our headphone clamp. Very basic. You can see it's all just 90-degree angles, but I wanted to make this basic shape for people who are just starting, and I wanted to give a kind of a simple introduction and help you understand constraints. So to sum everything up, we started at the origin. We started drawing a rough outline of what we wanted using the auto applied constraints, like vertical and horizontal constraints. So this line started out vertical, but we placed a point here, horizontal, we placed a point here. We continued having the line option selected, and we can just keep drawing lines. This one, you just have to drag kind of vertical, and it will automatically apply that. The same thing, you just kind of draw horizontal, it will automatically put the horizontal constraint. So you draw the rough outline, and then we start putting dimensions in and applying other constraints like this equal constraint. So we know like this, we want this to be the same length as this. Instead of applying two different constraints, we can just apply one and then set them equal to each other. Same thing with these points here. We want these to be vertical relative, so we make sure we have a vertical constraint locking these 2 points. together horizontally. So if one moves, if you want to make one longer, the other one will be just as long. And yeah, so now that we're done with the sketch, what we can do is we can hit check, and we have now finished our sketch. All right, so now that we finished our sketch, we can now start to make a 3D object from the sketch. So first thing I talked about, or one of the first things I talked about, was how up here, now that we're not in the sketch, we have these operations which allow us to edit 3D objects and bring objects into the 3D world. So most basic rudimentary one that everybody uses, that you'll probably always use, is extrude. This is the most basic way to make an object three-dimensional. So if you click extrude, or the keyboard shortcut is Shift E, you can click that and you can select a face that we want to extrude. Now we'll select this face. Now what this does is this will give a direction that it's extruding and also a length that it's extruding. So you have a couple options here. New is what we'll be using. This will make a new part. Add is useful if you're like making an extrude off a face and that face is part of an existing part, and you don't want to make a new part. You just want to add that extrude to an existing part. And we don't have an existing part, so we want to make a new part, so we'll click new. These parts aren't important for now. We'll just worry about new. So, and then select blind, because blind basically lets you just type in a custom distance, and that's just how far it will extrude. In future videos, we'll talk about what these other options let us do. So the depth of it is the dimension we need to put in. Doesn't matter too much, but if you want like a stable kind of hold of the headphones, you could do 50 millimeters is what I would do. And you just hit check, and yeah, so now you've made your very first part in OnShape. So you can see these sharp corners might not be very good. You might not want sharp corners on your piece, and also sharp corners add stress to the part, and for 3D printing they are points where they would peel, because if you were to make this, you'd probably want to 3D print it. So there's this other option called fillet. Now you might have realized how when we're in a sketch we have these arc options here. You might think, well, why don't we just add arcs instead of drawing corners? Well, it's much easier to just draw these lines like this. When at the beginning, when you saw me making the overall shape of the part, it was very easy to just take these lines and then just draw it horizontally, continue it, and make a vertical line. So this fillet lets you kind of just round out these corners once you've got in the part into 3D space. So you can click fillet or just Shift F, and you can just click on the corners you want to fillet. So let's say we want to fillet like these corners here on this hook part. So you can see those round out, and you'll get this option here, which allows you to choose the radius of the fillet. So you can imagine the fillet as just a sector of a circle, and this radius is essentially the radius of that circle. You can just leave all these on default. The only thing you really should be worrying about right now is just the radius. So let's say we want to make this a 3 millimeter fillet, and we also want to fillet these inside edges here, and maybe this edge there, and maybe these edges. But let's say maybe we want to leave these sharp there just because they match up with the table better. Yeah. So now we have the overall shape of the hook. So you can see here's where our headphones will sit, and then also where the table will kind of slot in here. And later in a future video, I'm going to be talking about how to make a clamp that you can screw down where and it can push against the table, and that will lock it into place. Yeah, so that's about it for this video. Stay tuned for the second part of this video. We'll be finishing this design and making a finalized table clamp for headphones. Hope you enjoyed